Hello friends, we are slowly approaching the end of our lessons, friends. In the settings, in the final settings, there is a part I want to show you, and it's an important part. Normally, with progressive rendering, while you are rendering, this part is open. Having this part open causes you to render in the style we call progressive rendering. So there is a difference between progressive and bucket style rendering, which appears as small boxes on the screen. All the renders I have shown in our lessons were rendered progressively, friends, because we use progressive rendering to quickly create the effects we need to see in the scene. In the final step, we remove the checkmark here, friends. We can then adjust to the settings you want here and proceed with rendering. And then the rendering composed of buckets, which we call bucket rendering, comes into play. I will show it shortly. Look, let's set this to low, and to quickly demonstrate this from the settings, I'm doing it like this. Friends, 1:1. I'm setting these settings to 800 by 800. Look, I have set it to the lowest settings on low, friends. Here's the difference between progressive and normal rendering. Look, friends, when I switch to progressive rendering, I start the render. Look, to show the difference between the two, because this is an important topic, friends. Look, friends, in progressive rendering, there is a part that is continuously illuminated and constantly processing. Look, here we don't see the buckets, and in progressive rendering, there's a brighter situation. You need to adjust this brightness yourself between progressive rendering and bucket rendering, friends. Because look, for example, the exposure values here are at 1.5. For instance, let me set it to 1.1 here, friends, or let me set it to 0. In this case, the values in the buckets can be a bit different, friends. Therefore, it is beneficial to increase the values here. Look, in bucket rendering, in progressive rendering, the render is finished, friends. It immediately showed you the scene. It opened the user again and automatically showed you the value of the scene at this setting and this toning. This is the purpose of progressive rendering, to show you this. But for example, look, I'm turning off the progressive rendering. I came here and pressed the render button. Friends, now there will be a render starting with buckets. The buckets we refer to are the little boxes, friends. The large boxes are the graphics cards boxes, and the small boxes are the processors boxes. Since we are using CUDA, those boxes will process these parts one by one, square by square, and give us the normal result of the render. There is a clear quality difference between progressive and bucket rendering, friends. Well, in bucket rendering, it takes 2 to 3 times longer. That's why in the final render, you need to turn off your progressive rendering. Look now. Now I want to show you how the buckets work, friends. I want to show you how those boxes work. This is an important part. So you can use it to quickly get renders from progressive rendering. You can use it to see the effect of the scene, that feature. But the bucket process we mentioned starts in the final render. See, did you notice, friends? Look, there are squares here. Look, it's rendering quickly. Do you see? The large ones are the graphics card. The small ones are the processors, buckets, friends. By rendering in this way, it brings us the final state of the scene. Since we are rendering at the lowest setting, which we call low, it renders quickly like this. Now I'm going to give you a tip, friends. In high render, there's no need to do high plus. You don't need to set the settings to high plus, friends. Let the render finish, then I'll show you a part. You can also render there, friends. Now look, the render is finishing. Again, the situations here will become active. Look, the test user has become active. This is the render taken in bucket. Actually, the difference between the two, friends, is clearly noticeable. It might not be clearly visible on the screen right now, but there is a difference between progressive and bucket. Now, there's a situation like this. In the final render, friends, you brought this low and made it high. If you do high plus, the values here increase significantly. But if you make it high and set the noise limit value here to 0.05, friends, the noise limit is this. The photon particles falling with the light on the screen adjust the frequency of the photon particles, which we cannot currently see with the naked eye. The better this frequency is, the clearer image you get, in dark areas. That's why this part is important, friends. What did I do? Look, when I changed that, it switched to the custom section. Now I can render by adjusting the resolution as I wish from here, friends. I took a render regarding the render time. Let me show you the render I took. To avoid waiting too long, let's go to the desktop. I had a render named 002. Here. 003. Sorry. Look, this is a render like this. I will show how to do this render in Photoshop. Look, we have a soft render. It has a slight yellowish tint. It has a slight effect of the sun, But if you want, you can change these by playing with color correction. So there's no problem at all. If it turns too blue, you can change it to yellowish. If it's too yellowish, you can turn it back to the main tones, the normal tones. In the next lesson, I will show how to enhance this effect, how to do it. Those who know Photoshop are already familiar with this, but for those who don't know, I will show a brief interaction. You can take different renders from different angles. I had shown vertical and square ones. In our next lesson, we will continue with Photoshop summaries. Friends, that's all for this lesson. See you in the next lesson.